An estimated 70 to 85 million people perished during the Cold War. This was around 3% of the 1940 world population. A unifying factor was greatly needed as chaos and fear would strike nations on both sides. Good morning, my name is Arya Kaladindi, and today I will be discussing the impact of nationalism in the Cold War. My research question is that during the time period of the Cold War, to what extent did nationalism in the United States affect cultural unity? My argument is that during the time period of the Cold War, nationalism in the United States positively affected cultural unity. First off, national progress was induced during the Cold War due to this cultural unity. Motivating factors of the Cold War included three main things: nationalism, identity, and propaganda. Now, after World War II, there was a mass effort to revive the works of past Russian intellectuals. By reviving the works of these intellectuals, a link was forged between science and national identity. Now, Nikita Khrushchev, first secretary of the Communist Party, used the launch of Sputnik to declare the success of communism over capitalism. Now, this would relate back to the clash between ideology and national prestige. Now, when news of Sputnik, as it was the first man-made object to orbit the Earth, reached the United States, people were shocked. In fact, some even thought it was damaging to their national pride. Historian Walter A. McDougall illustrates this when he says no event since Pearl Harbor set off such repercussions in public life. Now, this chart illustrates that since the launch of Sputnik, which took place on October 4th, 1957, science education funding dramatically increased in an effort for the United States to keep up and even be more advanced in space travel and other technology. National achievements. So on April 12, 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first man in space. He was celebrated through radio announcements and patriotic songs. Commander Neil Armstrong, Command Module Pilot Michael Collins, and Lunar Module Pilot Edwin Buzz Aldrin from the United States were the first men on the moon. Now, these men were celebrated as national heroes. They had roadways, buildings, and even children being named after them. Now, Lloyd Kramer, author of the book Nationalism in Europe and America, illustrates how people feel when they're connected to a larger society. He says when people feel committed to larger communities or interests, or to ideas of human rights and political progress, for example, nationalism can contribute to a sense of hope about the future. Secondly, both the Soviet Union and the United States would have different interests, and this cultural unity would help them advance these interests to the benefit of both the nations. Now, on one side, the United States, they want to encourage economic growth by promoting world trade. They also wanted to promote democracy and the idea of free enterprise. They also wanted to bring anti-communist revolution to Asia and other developing nations, and they wanted to protect already existing democratic governments. Now, on the other hand, the Soviet Union wanted to encourage communism in other nations. They wanted Germany to be weaker as a whole. They believed communism was superior to capitalism, and they promoted dictatorships in Europe and other countries. Now, as people began to know the different cultures between both countries, they realized that threats to national security weren't as bad as they seemed, and common interests were established, and they're pushed forward through alliances between these two nations. So nationalism would lead to an increase in varied cultural identities as well. So this chart shows the amount of pride that the United States has built within its citizens to support itself during times of need. Now, 69% of the American population seem very to extremely proud to be American. Around 64% of the population surveyed owns an American flag, and around 51% own apparel branding patriotic imagery or symbols. Now, research related to a theory known as the Tightness, Looseness theory, provided by the College Board, illustrates that some cultures have more of a defiance than other cultures, and essentially shows that tightness is associated with social complexity across cultures. Maybe because this social complexity engenders a greater need for large-scale coordination and cooperation. Also provided by the College Board stimulus, there were first-hand experiences of people living in Estonia during the Song and Dance Festival. Prior to the independence of Estonia, the Estonian people were oppressed by the Soviet Union. In fact, some people in Estonia have no idea what not being a free country looks like. Now, by cherishing this freedom and developing their own culture, they are able to embrace the nation that they live within. So, admittedly, some would argue that nationalism can actually damage a country and its progress. Nevertheless, nationalism is still a vital aspect of the spread of unity and culture. When a nation imposes authority through a more independent style, nationalism is limited because ideas are not able to spread toward culture lacking economic or ideological uniformity. Sovereignty from Moscow was very individualistic, leading to the eventual decline of the Soviet Union. According to an excerpt in the book Democracy in America, provided by the College Board Stimulus, the communist government of the Soviet Union caused people to feel as if they were isolated, causing nationalistic ideas to really be contained. So as social conditions would become more equal, people start to think of themselves as standing alone and only caring about themselves. Through the promotion of nationalism by leadership in the country, an era of increased cultural unity was sparked in an effort to support the country in space advances. Nationalism is able to promote national progress and an increase in varied cultural identities. Additionally, when nations see the common interest between each other, they are able to advance those interests to the benefit of both nations. Although nationalism can have both constructive and obstructive effects, without nationalism, there would be less of a spread of beneficial ideas which would support the nation during difficult times. These are my works cited, and thank you. Any questions?
I do have 2 questions for you. First question, what evidence did you gather that you didn't use, and then why didn't you use it?
So some of the evidence that I gathered was the impact of nationalism in the Soviet Union. And nationalism in the Soviet Union, it did have both positive and negative effects there, but my research was focused on the United States, and just by understanding how it was in the Soviet Union, I was able to make connections, but didn't directly use it in my papers or my presentation.
Okay, and what advice would you have for other researchers who consider this topic in the future?
So I would really recommend emphasizing nationalism and focusing on the research related to nationalism, both the positive and negative effects in the United States and the Soviet Union, so you could really understand, even though nationalism can be positive, it can also have contradictory effects, and to really understand the concept of nationalism in promoting cultural unity.